Hello, everyone. My name is Kimberly from ICEV. Thank you for joining us for today's session, Securing CTE Funding in 2020. This is a big issue that a lot of people are talking about, and we are excited to have Paula Love with us today. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you, Kimberly. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. And we're going to go through and look at some opportunities that you may have in terms of coming up and the current funds that are available for your CTE programs. During these challenging times right now, folks, you may be wondering when funding might catch up with your students and community needs. Pre-COVID, many state educators and business community leaders and other elected officials increasingly recognize the value of career and technical education. And there were a lot of targeted funding for career and workforce development to improve the conditions of learning. The Carl Perkins, the Title IV Part A, Student Support and Academic Enrichment Programs, the Title I Part A, Individuals with Disabilities Act, and many, many other formula funds enabled career and technical programs to grow and flourish. Then COVID-19 happened. And with it came distance from the relationships that we formed at schools during the long period of class cancelizations. But instead of causing a downward turn for CTE, it has actually intensified the need for quality online learning supports. The need for CTE has indeed opened up with new funding opportunities. So today, we are going to cover some very important opportunities that exist. We're going to look at the Education Stabilization Fund through the CARES Act. We're going to talk about the fund usage, and we're going to also explore the flexibilities that happened with funding. We're going to explore some funds that you can use for your school or school district. We're going to look in that crystal ball and talk about what's the forecast for funds. And then we're going to also begin to explore some funds beyond the CARES Act money. So let's launch in and go right into the CARES Act emergency grants. We all know, and we're all experiencing, that this coronavirus outbreak has changed the way schools are operating. And this upheaval could continue well into the next school year. We're seeing and we're hearing about tax revenue losses that might bring sharp cuts to our education budget. Recognizing this, in March 27th of 2020, this year, some of the $2 trillion in the CARES Act package of money went to what was called the Education Stabilization Funds. Now, there's also some proposals for more possibilities underway, and we're going to discuss that when we talk about the forecast a little bit later in this presentation. But for now, I want you to take a look at this slide, which talks about the major grant programs that were created through the CARES Act Education Stabilization Fund. There are really four main areas: the Education Stabilization Fund discretionary grants, the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, and then the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund. You're also going to see on this slide some other funds that are also available under the Education Stabilization Funding. But for the sake of our conversation, we're going to be focusing on just a few that really impact K-12. If you want to find out additional information or get a refresher on what I'm talking about today, you can go to the website from the U.S. Department of Education listed above to find additional information on the funds that we're going to discuss, plus the other ones that are also listed on this slide. So let's take a look at just the breakdown of the money that's available under the Education Stabilization. Again, we are going to focus on that $13.2 million that's available for K-12 schools, but you will also notice that there is a lot of other money available as well. And I want to draw your attention to things like the Project Serve, the nutrition grants, and the additional ones that we're going to talk about called micro grants, which are actually the discretionary monies as well. So let's break down the money and let's really talk about the two formula grants under the CARES Act that really impact K-12 education. The first one is called the Elementary and Secondary Schools Emergency Relief Fund. And you see the acronym there. You may see that a lot when you're going out and looking for these funds. The acronym is ESSER, and it can have an F at the end of it standing for those funds. Again, the amount of money is $13.2 billion that's available. This pot of money is just for K-12. It is a formula grant, meaning that every state gets an allocation and then those funds are allocated to local school districts. Notice the deadline to apply for these funds is September 30th, 2021. So there's a lot of flexibility and there's a lot of things happening around these funds that states are doing right now. But the deadline where these funds must be applied for, again, is September 30th, 2021. In addition to that allocated amount, there's also the Governor's Emergency Relief Fund, GEERF. There is $3 billion available, and this comes down to each governor as an allocated amount, and the governor has discretion over how they use these funds. They can use it for schools in K-12, they can use it for colleges and universities. And notice the deadline to apply, again, is September 30th, 2021. Now, in addition to these two formula grants for K-12, there is also two competitive grants. One is called Rethink K-12 Education Models Grant. Notice in this slide that the grants can go up to $20 million, but also notice who's eligible. It is only the state education agencies that can apply for these funds. You may also pay attention to that deadline, which is already passed. So those funds have been announced, they've been out, and perhaps some of your states have already considered or put an application in for these funds. We need to watch carefully for the winners to see if a winner is indeed in your state for these funds. So keep an eye out for these funds from the Department of Education, and you might also talk with your CEV representative, because they also will be watching on your behalf when those funds will be announced in different states. Now, in addition to that competitive grant, there's also another one that's called Reimagining Workforce Preparation Grants. Again, notice the amount. And again, I want you to pay attention to who is eligible. It is state workforce boards. The deadline for this grant is coming up, August 24th. So this one's currently available. This one indeed looks at those post-secondary programs and looks at that workforce preparation. But I challenge you to also begin to talk with some of your state workforce boards that may be looking at this particular grant, because we all know that between secondary and post-secondary, there is a transition. So there may be some opportunities, again, for looking at CTE funding in this particular grant. So we want to keep our eyes on this one as well. Now let's talk a little bit more about how these funds can be used. We're actually going to explore 12 allowable uses of these funds. But as I discuss them, I want you to keep in mind that right now, states have a lot of flexibility over these funds. So although that there are some particular guidance in the uses of the funds, states can really determine how they may want to use these funds. So let's take a look at the allowable uses. The law says that there are 12 uses. In the next couple slides, and I know they're a little busy, but we're going to focus in really on the part that's in the red, because that has the most alignability to you for CTE. Notice the first allowable use is any activity authorized by the Elementary Secondary Education Act, which is actually the ESSA, as Every Student Succeeds Act now. And it includes all of our title programs, but it also includes individuals with disability, the Adult Education Act, the Carl Perkins Career and Technical Education Act, as well as the Homeless Acts. So any activity that we have used before for formula grants in those regards is an allowable use for these funds. The second one I've put a little bit in a smaller print, but I just want you to know about it. It's coordination of preparation and preparedness efforts of local education agencies, our school districts. Number 3 is important because it says it gives decision-making power to principals and other school leaders to address the needs of their individual schools. So indeed, if a need for CTE is there, and you have the decision-making powers of your school or school district, those funds can be used in that regard. Number 4 highlights special populations, such as low-income students, children with disabilities, again, English language learners, and other children in order to meet their needs. Number 5 is, again, looking at the preparedness and response efforts. Number 6 goes into training, but notice it's training on sanitation and minimizing the spread of diseases. Number 7 goes into purchasing supplies and needs for your facility for it to be clean. And number 8 is important for us because it talks about providing technology for online learning to all students. So again, a real nice connection to CTE. Number 9 talks about purchasing educational technology, including hardware, software, and connectivity, which we know is a major issue right now under COVID. Number 10 is mental health services. Number 11 extends the learning to after school and summer learning programs as well. And many governors have talked about summer bridge programs in using these CARES dollars for that. And number 12 is our catch-all, other activities as necessary to work with the local education agency. Now, looking at these funds, the CARES Act money, We find that there's going to be a lot of flexibility for every state to do and meet those needs of the 12 areas. But in addition, there is also a lot of flexibility going under our regular funds, such as Carl Perkins and the Elementary and Secondary Education Act and IDEA. Back in April, the U.S. Department of Education sent a letter out to all the state chief officers inviting them to talk about waivers and flexibilities for them, for their local school districts. And this included additional time to spend money, how they would spend certain funds, and the removal of barriers for needs of assessments around funding. On April 21st, all states were granted this waiver for their funds. This is the broadest opportunity that we have ever seen before. And state and all of the school districts now have extensions to their funds. That's why what we're seeing, even in that CARES money, where I said it was out through September 30th, 2021. So states now and you as local school districts have more time to expend these funds to meet new needs that's happened as a result of the coronavirus. So now let's go back to the CARES money, the elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds that we talked about earlier. And let's talk about how you get those funds for your school or your school district. First of all, school districts need to apply to their state. And every state has to send out at least 90% of their allocated amount to subgrants to the local school districts based on formulas from Title I. So you need to keep that in mind based on the formulas from Title I dollars. So how do you as a school district access these formula grants? Each state right now has a different timeline. For example, in Texas, their local application is out and the deadline is August 24th. In Wisconsin, their local application is out with a deadline of July 31st. In Colorado, their application is out with a deadline of December 31st. So where do you find out about this information and how each state is going to have those allocations? You can go to your state's website, or you can contact your CEV representative who works along with me to ensure that we are trying to monitor and let folks know when those local allocations are out. Now, what happens to that other 10% of those funds? The state can retain those. They can send those out as additional subgrants or even contracts, and they can use 0.5% for administrative cost as well. So let's take a look at the timeline a little bit, and let's go through the timeline again for how these monies are flowing. In the spring of 2020, there was an initial award made for these funds. States right now are deciding how they are going to use and how they are going to send those funds out to local school districts. That's why we're getting varying timelines and differences for what happens. September 30th, 2021 is the last date the Department of Education can actually make those awards to state departments. And then, and this is very important, as a local school district, you have until September 30th, 2022 to obligate those funds. So although the award announcement, the ending date is September 30th, 2021, school districts have until September 30th, 2022 to actually utilize those funds. So please keep the timeline in mind as you make an application to your state to receive these funds. Now let's look at a little bit of funding forecast. What's going to happen next? There's a lot of discussion going on right now over the next stimulus bill that may happen. You may have heard of the HEROES Act, which would direct $1 trillion to state and local governments and $90 billion specifically for education. On June 30th, there was also Senator Patty Murray of Washington that introduced a new coronavirus child care and education relief fund. It's a $345 billion stabilization fund that is being proposed that would allow K-12 schools to address any learning losses, put in place health protocols, provide for both in-person and hybrid and remote learning, and it would prohibit states from their funding of schools for use of these funds for at least 3 years. So in this new proposal, the breakdown looks sort of like this: $12.9 billion for communities impacted by the coronavirus for education, $12 billion for special needs students with a specific emphasis also on preschool, $4 billion for the E-rate program that will provide technology and connectivity to students in need. And in addition, there is some other provisions for the healthcare and childcare needs for our students in it. And also there are a number of higher education programs designed to help with the transition into college and the workforce. Now we need to keep our eye on this new stimulus package and see if indeed there is another opportunity for funds to come down as well. So now let's look at funding beyond what we've just discussed under the CARES Act. There are so many private sector funders that have stepped up during this time of need. Actually, there are many foundations and corporations that have contributed right now to the digital divide for schools and students as they're looking at this remote learning. There's a lot of community foundations that are actually redirecting the money that they had out before to help narrow this gap. You need to be keeping your pulse on the private sector funding too, because it has varying deadlines depending on the foundation or corporate source or the community foundation in your state or in your region that you can apply for as well. Then in addition, just recently, there was a new challenge issued for educators to rethink options for rural high school students during this coronavirus pandemic. The purpose is to really advance rural technology education and prepare students for the careers of today and tomorrow. What a wonderful fit for CTE. There is actually $600,000 available for this particular project. That you need to be a secondary high school or an LEA to apply for these funds, and you also need to ensure that you're servicing students from rural communities. The link is below, and the due date for this particular opportunity is October 8th, 2020. So now, where do we find some help out about all of the funds that we've been discussing today? One source that we help with schools and school districts is called grantsalert.com. There's a lot of support in there for CTE programs in 2020 if they are current and are being announced by state. But also know if you have a question about your state or other CARES funds that you can, in addition, contact CEV. They have access to a tool that can help you and support you in finding those CTE funds. So Kimberly, at this point, I'm going to turn it back to you.
All right, thank you, Paula. Thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you found that as informational as I did. We look forward to